Hello and welcome to Globe Heartfulness webinar. Last week we had Terran Daily with us who spoke about some solutions for children, for parents to raise peaceful, happy children during this difficult time of COVID-19 lockdown. She spoke about how some basic needs of children were challenged and unmet, and how as parents we can find unique and interesting ways to fulfill those needs. Towards the end of the webinar, I invited participants to send in your parenting questions and a few challenges to Terran. We received a lot of questions, but Terran has categorized all of them into buckets and categories, and she's going to address all those questions today. We've also received a few success stories. We've also received what has worked for you, what has not worked for you, and we are very grateful that a lot of you have used the resources which Terran has shared. Please continue to use those resources and write to us and let us know if any of those has given you wonderful results. Also, let us know what has not worked for you. So today we have categorized questions from you in these buckets. We have received questions about discipline, questions about children using electronic gadgets, about boredom. So this is one very interesting question which we've received about boredom and how children can play without adult intervention. So there have also been success stories shared by mothers who have explained how they have handled boredom of children. So we're going to share that also. And questions about how to handle sensitive children during this specifically challenging times, because sensitive children need a lot of outdoors, and now that it's cut down, we've received a lot of questions about that. And then we've received questions about games and activities. And of course, we are going to share unique and beautiful and wise words from the guides of heartfulness as a conclusion. So let's get started today. And with the first few questions about discipline. So broadly categorizing these questions, we have a question from Geeta and we have a question from Mandana. Geeta's question is, how can I improve preteen and teenage children's compliance to discipline? Mandana's question is, Mandana has younger children and her question is about like, how can I handle children when they're throwing tantrums? Should I do timeout or punishment, or should I set boundaries? So these are two questions in two different spectrum. One is from Geeta, who has asked us about question about disciplining teenage children, and Mandana's kids are reasonably younger. So she's asked question about handling very young kids. So now over to Terran, and please, guide us with your wisdom about discipline.
Okay, all right. Well, those are really good and really packed questions. It's going to take a little bit of discussion to cover all of that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen.
I can see your screen.
I'm getting it up. I'm doing it.
Okay.
I'm doing it right. I'm getting it up to slideshow. Okay, so now we've done this, we've done this, we've done this. So the big question really is, what is discipline? It can mean a lot of things to different people. When we look at the word itself, the root of the word is Latin, and it's from a Latin word that means to learn, discere. So it's something about learning. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we really want for our children? And I think we probably could pretty much all agree that we want our kids to be happy, we want our kids to be joyous, but at the same time, we want them to be respectful, we want them to keep themselves and others safe, we want them to be kind and compassionate, and keep at least a certain amount of order in our environment. And they don't always do all those things just of their own accord. They are things that we do need to help them out with. So that's our job. But the question is, how do we help them? And it's a tricky question. Most of us do our best, but we don't have any particular organized way to teach it or to help them to learn to be disciplined. And as I say, it's meant a lot of things to a lot of people. So I thought one thing we could do would be to first look at several different types of discipline and what the pros and cons are of each and when each might be best used. So the first one I want to talk about is command-based discipline. And this is when the adult more or less tells the child what to do and they expect them to do it. And if they don't do it, they're going to face a consequence. And it's a kind of discipline that can be effective if it's used consistently and if it's used with real love and care for the child rather than just out of some sense of frustration by the adult. Consequences can be anything from withholding privileges to grounding to scolding, and occasionally some of us will get physical with a kid. And all of those actually, I mean, I remember a story from my dad. He told that when I was a little one, when I was about two, maybe 2.5, and I ran out into a busy road, and he ran after me, and he gave me a big wallop on the backside. And I cried and cried and cried. I don't know that he had ever done that before. But he was doing it because he really wanted me to understand I could not go in that road. So that was an example of even using a physical discipline in a way that actually was loving and out of caring for the child. The thing we have to watch for is that we don't do it out of any kind of actually any kind of consequence discipline on the spur of the moment, out of frustration, like, okay, you're grounded for 10 years, you know. It's got to be something that we do with care and with thought. And it does have some negatives. It does have some drawbacks. One of them is that the stronger forms like physical punishment or even scolding can have a bad impact on a child, especially a sensitive child. And it can produce a lot of shame and fear. And those emotions get embedded in the child, and then it produces other behaviors and other things that we really don't want. So that can be a definite negative to stronger forms of command-based discipline. Also, whatever kind you use, if it's you know, like a strong consequence or not such a strong consequence, anytime that you give a kid a consequence for behavior that you don't want him to do, it's going to create, or it's likely to create, a feeling of anger and rebellion in him. And that can backfire because our kids have a way of getting back. You know, if they're angry, if they're resentful, if they're upset, it's going to show itself in other ways. And the third problem with it is it's good at telling a kid what you don't want them to do, but it doesn't do much to teach them about what you do want them to do. So it's something that can be used. It's needed in some situations, but use it with care and be aware of what you're doing and of the possible negative consequences. The next type is agreement-based discipline. And this is where there's a community, and in our case, the community would probably be the family, who agree all together on certain rules and the consequences for breaking them. So the child or children, they've had a voice in it. They may not get exactly what they want. It may be up for a vote, or it may be something you have to negotiate, but they've had a say. And so they're more likely to own these rules that you're making, and they're more likely to follow them in sort of goodwill and good faith without becoming too angry and resentful if there is a consequence. And talking a little bit about rules, the best rules are very specific. So a rule refers to a behavior, not a value. So be respectful is not a rule, because respectful is vague. It could mean too many different things. So a rule would be something like use your words, not your fists, or speak to others as you'd like to be spoken to, something like that, so that it's clear and definite whether the child has followed the rule or hasn't followed the rule. And this also has a couple of limitations. One is that the children have to be old enough to participate in making the rules for agreement-based discipline to work. And also there will be times that you don't have time. It's a time-consuming process, well worth it, but time-consuming. So there will be times that some kind of urgent situation comes up and you just don't have time to go through the process. And then you'll need to use a different form of discipline. So the third kind is incentive-based discipline, where the guiding adult celebrates or gives incentives for desired behavior. And we talked about this a lot in the last webinar. We called it watering what you want to grow. So I don't probably need to go into it too much this time, except just to remind you to set goals, preferably with the child, and set goals that are attainable by the child. They're a little bit of a stretch, but they're not going to be so difficult that the child feels overwhelmed or frustrated trying to meet the goal. And the way you celebrate when a child does what he or she is supposed to do can be a lot of ways. You can just have happy words like, oh, I just love it when you do that. Or you can give them little stickers, or some parents have a star chart where they get stars every time they do it, and when they get so many stars, they get a special treat of some sort. So there are a lot of ways to celebrate and water those behaviors you want to grow. And there is a lot of research that shows that this type of incentive-based discipline is more effective than command-based, consequence-based discipline. It actually does work better. The thing that's hard about it is it's challenging for the adult. All of us are wired to notice what's wrong in our environment. And what's right just kind of passes by without us noticing it too much because it's right. We don't think about it. So when your child is doing things that you enjoy, you're not necessarily going to be noticing too much until you've trained yourself to do that. You're going to notice when they do things you don't enjoy. So it takes a little consciousness and training on the part of the parent, self-training, to begin to notice when the child is doing something you do like so you can celebrate it with them. The fourth type is what I call needs-based discipline. And this kind of discipline is discipline, remember, is teaching. Um, this kind of discipline has its roots in Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. I think a lot of people who are watching might have heard Daji in his Sunday morning talk about nonviolent communication, very, very timely. It's a big subject, and we'll just be able to barely touch on it here. And if people are interested, please do try to get some further training in nonviolent communication or heartful communication. So what the premise is here is that everything anyone says or does is an attempt to meet a good life-sustaining human need. So needs are things like respect, safety, playfulness, um, cooperation, so that even if the child does something that it may be a little hard to see what their need is, there will be a good life-sustaining need under it. We used an example last week, of the child who was banging a door. That's a behavior that the mother was not enjoying. So when she thought about it, there were a couple of needs that behavior could be meeting. We thought one could be sensory input, sensory stimulation. Some kids need a lot of that. Another need could be just feeling their effectiveness in the world, feeling their power in the world to make something happen, especially if it's a little one. Just something like banging a door can be quite satisfying to them. Or it could be a need for mom's attention, for connection with the mom, especially if mom is busy doing something else. So once we identify the need of the child, and then we identify our own need, which in this case with this mom was some space and some quiet, we try to think of ways that all the needs can be met as well as possible. So for example, let's say the child it was a sensory need they were meeting. They really got off on that vibration and the sound that was under their control of the door. So this even it might be possible right in a moment. If the mother was on a phone call, she could pause the call, or she could work with the child later and rehearse. When mom's on the phone, you know, what are you going to do? You like to have things bang and click, and what can you do that's not going to be disturbing the phone call? And you work on it together. So maybe they'll pop bubble wrap, or they'll go in the other room and lift their toy box lid up and down. Anyway, whatever it is, you work on it together and figure it out. So you try to come up with practical solutions together. And when this works, it's very sweet. It has a very sweet feeling to it because everyone's needs are met, and you stay in good connection with the child through this. You're not getting cross and angry and the child getting upset and hurt. You're working on something together and staying in connection. It does take skill and kind of training in a new way of seeing things. So that's where some additional training would be really useful to people who want to explore that more. Then a fifth kind is what I'm calling value-based discipline. And here the community works together to understand and live values. We talked about this last week too, quite a lot, and gave some ideas for how values can be discussed, talked about, taught, activities you can do to help focus on particular values. It takes a little thought, a little creativity, and moms and dads have a lot of creativity. I'm sure people could come up with ways and activities to work with various values. We talked about some last week. But even more important than explicitly teaching it is the adults modeling it. Whatever the value is you want to awaken in the child. I don't say instill because the value's there in the child. All we have to do is really awaken it. For example, if we want to work with the value of respect, we have to ask ourselves as parents, how are we modeling that? Are we respectful when we talk to the child? Does the child see us being respectful when we talk to our spouse or to or about other people? Do we speak with respect of other people, or do we speak in belittling, critical, judgmental kind of ways about other people? So we need to be conscious about living that value ourselves before we try to help our child live it. And this is one place where I think that heartfulness can be really valuable for people through the processes that heartfulness offers of meditation and relaxation and prayer and working on oneself in various ways. We can really grow, oh goodness knows I have, tremendously in those areas of beginning to live values more and more and more fully. Of course, we're not going to be perfect. And then we have to live the value of acceptance of ourselves or acceptance of other people. So we do our best and we keep trying to grow in that area. Then the last one I want to talk about is what I'm calling trust-based discipline. And this is where the child follows the adult's wishes out of love, respect, and trust, not out of fear or not even really wanting to get something. It's just because they love and respect that adult and they want to do what the adult wants. It's a beautiful state that we don't find too often in today's world, because it does depend on the adult living the values. It depends on the connection with the adult, and also that the situation we're in is where a lot of the kind of traditional values that people have lived with, traditional values of each particular culture that the child is growing up in, they've been embedded in the culture for so long, and people have followed them, and grandparents have followed them, and great grandparents have followed them. And now so much is happening with all the connections between cultures around the globe that a lot of those traditional ways are not so secure. They're beginning to kind of fall apart, ravel at the edges, and in a way that may not be a bad thing, because what we're coming to, what we're striving toward, is finding what it is to be human, rather than what it is to be Tunisian or Swedish or Azerbaijani, whatever it might be. That we're learning what values and do we all share as humans? And what do we all strive for as humans? So again, as we begin to live our values more fully and be trustworthy for the child and be in connection with the child, they're much more likely to be moving into this kind of trust-based discipline. Now, Mandana's question had to do also with boundaries. And kids do need boundaries. This is one of their real needs. And they'll often test boundaries. They'll often see how far they can go before they get some pushback. And we can find that place of pushback of where we've had enough. We need to know that place. Where have we had enough? And there's several ways we can feel into that. What defines where we've had enough? So one would be rules that are established by parents or by parents and children together. When a child comes up against that and they do something that is against the rules, it needs to somehow be dealt with. It needs to somehow be talked about. Something needs to happen there so the child knows these are the rules and this is what I'm expected to do in this family, in this situation. Um, so the other is rules agreed by the whole family. So that's kind of two different things. With little kids, it's rules established by parents. With older kids, it's really nice if you can work on the rules as a whole family. And then there's also the needs of those in this situation. So if I find myself, if something a child is doing and I find myself feeling uncomfortable, I need to think what need of mine is not getting met here. And I need to express that need to the child so that the child knows there's two of us in this situation and both our needs count and we'll have to work it out together how to meet everybody's needs. And then also there's linking values to action so we can think about it later. Was that thing you did kind? Was it a respectful action? Where could we do better? What could we do better next time? And also the adults have to be ready for the kids to call them on it. Mom, that wasn't a respectful action. And then mom needs to listen and say, yeah, I think you're right. I'm going to try to do better. So Mandana also mentioned tantrums, and that's such a good subject. Kids do have tantrums, some more than others. They usually result from frustration or loss of control or a sense of helplessness. When a child doesn't get what they want, they're frustrated. If they, if another older sib is doing something and they don't have control over it, it's loss of control and a sense of helplessness. There are kids who seem to want to be in control a lot and get frustrated a lot and have tantrums a lot. And often what that is from is that they're experiencing anxiety and overwhelm. And in order to handle this overwhelm, they kind of say to the world, stop, I'm going to control this here. If I'm in control, I'm not going to get overwhelmed. And the overwhelm, it could come from sensory overload for a sensory sensitive kid. It can come from the amount of change in the world and the environment. And it can come from not having enough predictability. Kids do need a certain amount of predictability in their environment. Different kids need different amounts of predictability. But if they don't get what they need, it can make a tantrum a lot more likely. So what we can do about this, if we have this kind of child who does like to stay in control and might get frustrated easily, when possible, give choices. It's time to go to bed. Do you want your story first or a bath first? As much as possible, give choices. And try to stick to routines because the routines make life more predictable. With this type of child who likes to be in control, their routines are important to them. And if you do need to have a change, try to introduce it slowly when you can. Sometimes we can't, especially with things changing as fast as they are now. We can't always introduce changes gradually. The kid may be upset, and we'll have to find our way through that. And sometimes it's necessary to say no. the child wants his third cookie and he's had enough, and you know what's going to happen if you give him another one. You have to say no. I'm sorry, I wish you could have it, but it's not good for you, and that's all. We're going to stop there. And the child may have a tantrum, or if the kid that needs a lot of control for whatever reason doesn't get it, they may have a tantrum. So what you need to do is to let the child go on in tantrum. Once they've started a tantrum, let them tantrum. But while they are, you're going to stay physically and emotionally close to them. You're going to be with them in it. You're going to let them have a sense that you're there, you're present, you're with them. They're upset, but you're there with them while they go through this upset. Don't talk too much until the tantrums pass, because they're already in a state of overwhelm, quite likely. So just let them go on and finish their process of screaming, crying, whatever they need to do. And let them find out that they can do that. They can move through it on their own. But it's in that context of your support and love. And the child will, in this way, as you just let them go through however many tantrums you have to, they'll learn that it's all right. They might not get what they want. It's all right. They'll survive and they're going to be okay. And mom's still there and everything's going to be okay. A lot of times after a child is finished with a tantrum, I bet a lot of people have found this, they may go into an especially kind of sweet state.
The next question is being categorized into gadgets. So today there is like this huge ocean of entertainment available through our gadgets, through mobile phones, through laptops, through movies, through a lot of things. And so we have two questions, one from Abhishek and one from Sendel. Abhishek's question is, my kids are inspired by superheroes from Hollywood and Bollywood, and sometimes they want to imitate them. How to manage anger when when they portray playing these roles, and they are very young, they are 11 years and 5 years of age. So surely they want to model them, they want to ape them, and well, what can you do? That's how young children are, very impressionable. And Sendel's
Okay,
question,
and shall we just mention Senthil's question?
yeah, so Sendel's question is, how can we divert kids from online games? Yes, that's gaming industry is
Yeah,
and everybody is facing this challenge. I'm sure even it's just not kids, maybe adults too. We need diversion from games too, because
yes,
there are a lot of
yes,
games not only on like from the gaming console. There
yes,
are games on Facebook which you can just play while you're still on Facebook, and I think it's very relevant to talk about uh, the perils of electronics and gadgets to keep
yeah,
occupied. Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Terran, for addressing this very important, challenging
Mm,
question.
okay. All right. So first, we'll talk about Abhishek's question about the fighting and the kind of warfare kind of thing that his kids are enacting. And this is a tricky one because I don't think there's just a set, easy answer about that. Um, what we need to do is make a distinction between fighting and violence as part of a kind of mythic struggle between good and evil, and violence as entertainment, that the violence itself is the entertainment. Um, Kids have been enacting uh, the struggle between good and evil forever. I mean, look at Ramayana, look at Mahabharata, look at Star Wars. All of these are wonderful mythic struggles between good and evil. And the kids, actually, it feeds them to be involved in this, to act them out and maybe take both sides and really get to understand about that struggle in their in their bones, because it is a very real struggle. And this is actually preparation for later on. They will need to engage with this struggle between good and evil. You know, maybe that's stating it a little strongly, but every day we each have that battle within ourselves. We have parts of ourselves that pop up and want things that we our better half says no, that's no good, and we have to kind of sometimes have that warfare inside to be sure that we go in the direction that our best self would really want us to go. But in this kind of thing, the focus is on the story. It's on the struggle. It's not actually on the gory violence itself. Sometimes modern media fails us there, and they go to the violence itself being what's entertaining to the kids, and that's no good. That's going to only desensitize children to violence, and take them places that we really don't want them to go. So if that's what's going on, and the child is watching video games or playing video games or watching programs where there is just too much violence for the sake of violence, I think we're going to need to step in and exert some parental restrictions and direct them to other programs, as those will not be healthy for them to watch, especially with young children or sensitive children. We have to be really careful. If the child is looking afraid or is upset after seeing something, then we have to really take that to heart and steer them in other directions in the future. So I hope that helps to answer Abhishek's question. And then if we go to Senthil's question, how do we deal with kids? It can actually get to be an addiction to electronic devices. It's quite a big problem in today's world. It's actually quite a serious problem. I think we talked a little bit last week about the contrast between the digital world and the real world. In the digital world, everything is so easy and so fast. I mean, I look at my granddaughter play her games where she's constructing cities or houses, and all she has to do is take her finger and there's a brick laid, or and there's another brick laid, or and something else is constructed, and it's a swimming pool. And it kind of builds expectations that don't get met in the real world. In the real world, if you want to build a house, you actually have to pick up some bricks and carry them, and you have to know what to do with them and put them down and put the mortar in correctly. And it's just so much more trouble than the digital world, that kids start to think it's not worth it. Who needs to do that? I can build on Minecraft. I can build them really fast. So the real world starts to feel dull. It starts to feel boring and not very interesting and too much trouble. There's also a physical side. I'm calling this addiction. There's a physiological side to it. There's a chemical in the brain called dopamine. It's known as the pleasure chemical. It's released when we do something that gives us pleasure. And the games that kids play on electronic devices are full of things that release dopamine. I mean, every time you get a little ding or a little star, or you get a like on Facebook, or you get to go up to the next level, or whatever it is, it gives you a dopamine rush. And your brain gets to actually depend on those. It quits making its own dopamine, at least not to as much extent. So that when you take away all of that rush and you go out into the regular world, you don't it seems dull and actually just kind of boring. And there's also a lot of studies on the emotional and behavior effects of addiction, and that includes anxiety, insomnia, impulsivity, agitation, exhausted hyperarousal. How many times do you see your children after they've played games a while? They get this kind of glazed look in their eye, and they're like overexcited, but they're exhausted at the same time. And it can also lead to hyperactivity or withdrawal from real world social life and physical activity. And we know they need this physical activity. Here we go. So what the kids are going to need in that case is probably a digital detox. which might mean going without electronics for a while until they get where they can function in the world without their electronic devices. It's hard. This is a really tough. Many parents have talked to me about how hard it was to take their child through this. They go through withdrawal. They may be really hard to live with. They may be irritable and just sleepy and not want to do anything. And it takes a while, but if you can ride it through with them, they will come out at the other side. They're probably going to need more attention during that period of detox. They'll need help to think of things to do and help to stay busy and find other activities. They're probably going to complain a lot about being bored. Vigorous movement and time in nature are really helpful. Get them out and get them playing ball with friends, get them whatever, hiking, doing things that they enjoy. These are the recommended screen time amounts by the American Association of Pediatrics. Personally, I think they're a little generous. I'm not sure I would give quite this much time, but this includes all screen time, television, games, Facebook, chat rooms, everything like that. So 0 to 18 months, no screen time. Don't let those kids look at a screen. Their brains are forming. They don't need to get formed with these busy, chaotic images in them. It's going to be really disruptive to them. And then even 19 to 36 months, little or no screen time. 3 to 5 years, the Association of Pediatrics is giving them up to 1 hour a day. So that could include, some educational videos, some pretty fairy tales, some things that teach values, some things that teach sharing, that kind of thing. Then 6 to 10 years is 1 to 1.5 hours, and 11 to 13 years is up to 2 hours. And you'll need to really be firm about this because kids, oh boy, they just really want that electronic fix, and they'll just almost do anything to get it sometimes. So parents have to hold their ground and be really, really firm on that one. Okay, then we're going to go to boredom.
Oh, wait a minute, Terran. Before that, I would just like to go back a bit. So
Yes.
you had mentioned that, the digital detox and the withdrawal effects. You had mentioned that certainly children are going to feel that and perhaps complain. And one option is to maybe allow them time in nature. Do you have any other suggestions also in addition to that? Because perhaps for a few of them, time out in nature may or may not be possible during this.
Yes, that's true.
So within home, if there are easy alternates, if you could think of anything.
I have a good one. It's a catch-22 one. Let them watch videos. Let them watch exercise videos. And that'll be a little screen time, but they'll be getting their exercise at the same time. Or nature videos, or whatever. In lockdown, if it's a serious lockdown, I think a lot of places it's relaxing now, and kids are more at ease, and it's not so bad. If it's a serious lockdown where they really can't ever go out, well, we may need to stretch and let them have more beneficial screen time. But it is going to mean on the other side of the lockdown that there might be some digital detox needed. But I understand when kids really can't go out and they can't do anything, we may need to flex and stretch a bit.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Terran.
Shall I go on?
Yes, please. So we'll go to the next question, which was about boredom and playing without adult intervention. So we have Vaishnavi and Mandana's questions here with us. Vaishnavi is a work from home mother, and she needs a lot of uninterrupted work hours, and her 6-year-old daughter complains of being bored and interrupts her often. So she's asking for some suggestions. Mandana's question is very pertinent, like it's a different type of question. She says that how can I get some me time because as a mother, she also needs some rejuvenation, and which will again help her to give more quality and effective time back to her children. So, when she's with her me time, how can she keep her kids occupied? And that's a very relevant question. And
Yeah,
I think both are,
yeah,
so relevant. So,
yeah.
to you, Terran.
In both of them, the children need to be able to do things on their own without mom being right there, and that's tricky for some children. So with Vaishnavi, I made some suggestions. Um, we I suggested that she work on a skill teaching book with her daughter Vanaja, and they were starting to create a book together called Vanaja Plays All Alone. And it was going to show, like, I'm saying was, I don't know what stage it's in now, but the way we had it planned, it was going to be showing her playing. Like today, I could gather flowers in the garden and make them into pretty arrangements, and I did that for 10 minutes. We said, actually, I think it would be 20. We started with how long can she stay alone now, which was 20. So we started there. So we had her do something in the book for 20 minutes and then have some kind of a little celebration. Oh no, I know what we're going to do. We're going to fill a jar with stones. We were combining this with an incentive plan. It was a skill teaching book combined with an incentive plan. So each time, the first day, she was going to play 20 minutes doing whatever activity they decided to put on that page. And after that, they celebrated by putting a stone in the jar. And then the second day, she was going to play alone for 15 minutes and doing whatever activity they decided, and they put another stone in the jar. These were maybe kind of big stones in a little jar. So that after she got up to being able to play 1 hour by herself, increasing it 10 minutes at a time, that would fill up the jar, and then they would have some kind of a party or some kind of a celebration. So it was a combining of skill teaching and incentive. And the child was going to illustrate, maybe in this case she's old enough she could even write the words in the book, but the child was going to participate in making the book. So they were going to make it together, so that it would be it would be something that she was invested in and that she wanted to do. Okay, so I want to, and in Mandana's case, negotiating me time with older children, her children are just a little bit older, um, that you need to talk to them about it and explain that I need this time to regenerate so I can be a nicer mom. You want me to be nice. You don't want me to be irritable. I really do need this time. Let's think about some things you can do while I can go and have my time by myself. And so at one point, they were also developing a plan for what the children could do during that hour, half hour, whatever it was that mom needed to go off and renew her own resources. That's so important. How can you be there for your kids if you're burned out? Moms really do need to figure out ways to take time for themselves so that they can be more there for the children. With little kids, you might be able to get someone else to watch them for a while. With bigger kids, they can figure out some things to do. Now I want to show you what Vaishnavi and Vanaja came up with was, first of all, they had a paper shortage. It was lockdown. They didn't have paper. So this book, it was going to have to be a little bit in the future. But what they did come up with was a list. I think I showed this last week, but I want to show it again because it's so charming. Let's see if I can get it. Oh, well, wait a minute. Here we go. This is Vanaja's list. So she was talking about brushing her teeth, looking at joke videos, drawing. So she made her own list. That's the important thing. She made those things up and she wrote it herself. And she even came up with some ideas for her little brother. Now, here are ideas from other people. This is an idea from Adana, who's one of our active Kids at Home members who lives in the US. And she said that her husband is working from home and needs to go into his office in the bedroom several times a day. Her 2.5-year-old wants to follow him. So she is looking for ways to distract him. And she thought of creating a very simple visual schedule to give him some choices of what to do. So I'm making a picture here of a visual schedule. Adana happens to be an occupational therapist like I am, so she knows and uses visual schedules all the time. But I'm not sure that most moms would know what that was. What it is, the way I use it, if I were being with her little child, I would have photographs of him doing various activities that he enjoys. And I would let him choose which things he wants to do during this time that dad is in the office and put them on. What you can do is you can tape them somewhere on like a line like this is across, or you can put Velcro on the back and stick it on a Velcro strip so that the child, or you can just place them on the table. So the child will put, well, these are not Adana's ideas, but it's just what I could find pictures of. So the child will say, okay, first I'll color, then I'll play with blocks, then I'll watch a movie, then I'm going to make some music, then I'm going to do puzzles, then I'm going to play in my fort. So that this is even for little tiny ones, that they can sort of make their own list of things to do to help keep them occupied. And we had a wonderful discussion about boredom on our Active Kids at Home group. I actually want to read some of the things. These mothers wrote just beautiful things about how they've managed boredom with their children. It was a discussion. It started with Layla, and then Shivani came in with her thoughts, and then Nitya came in with her thoughts, and Parul came in with her thoughts. I'd like to read at least one of these, at least the first one that got it going. And then I'm going to post all of this. It's called Wisdom from Parents on Boredom, and it will be on the resource list, so you can read all of these wonderful things that the moms came up with. Insights, really deep insights about the nature of boredom and how to manage kids. So this is from Layla. The most magical moments happened when consciously, patiently, lovingly, and with pure intention but no expectation, I was able to simply observe my son being bored, resisting giving him something to do, just listening to him. It doesn't mean that I left him totally alone, figuring out what to do. On the contrary, I was more present than usual, deeply connected, comforting him. Initially, it looked like a little worm turning around in all directions, feeling tickled from within, crying from within silently, repeating, "I'm bored, Amma, I'm bored." And once this episode was over, there was a moment of pause, followed by a lighting in his eyes. He felt some inspiration from inside and would start something usually very new and creative, something that I wouldn't have thought about and wouldn't have taught him about, something that really belonged to him and kept him busy for hours and hours. The fact that our children are expressing being bored is something very, very important, I think. They are putting words on what they feel. And instead of letting them experience deeper what it really feels to be bored and to be in touch with this nothing to do, we have the tendency to suppress this precious opportunity by giving them something to do. From this nothing, everything can be created, and that is the beauty. Let's not steal this from them. Isn't that beautiful? Just to be with a child while they're bored, while they experience that emptiness, and let them for themselves experience something coming up from inside that's theirs that they want to do. And I think each one of these mothers in her own way expressed something similar about giving the child space to find what was within them to do. Let it come from them. Let who they are be born. And our children are so scheduled. They go to school, they have this, this, and this. They're home, they do this, this, and this. After school, they do this, this, and this. And they don't get much time to really just be and just feel and experience where do they want to go. So please give these a read. They're just beautiful.
Thank you so much, Terran. That was wonderful about boredom being such a beautiful thing. And that's very rarely people have that perspective for boredom. And thank you so much for sharing that beautifully.
Yeah, thanks to the mothers. Here I was busy thinking of ways to keep them busy, and these mothers had a whole different, very rich perspective.
Yeah. So the next question is about sensitive children. We have two questions, one from Shambhavi and the other is an anonymous question from a participant. So Shambhavi's 9-year-old son is a very sensitive person. He cries for small issues. He avoids outdoor sports. He has the fear of getting hurt. He is good in music. He sings well, but he doesn't want to go for any structured singing classes. He is disciplined, but not outspoken. He is choosy about making friends. And the mother says, I want him to go around and play happily with other boys, be active in sports and physical activities, and be a bit street smart. But unfortunately, she observes that he's not interested in physical activities. So that's the first question about sensitive children. There is another anonymous question, which is a serious question, is this anonymous mother's 9-year-old child hesitates to speak up his thoughts confidently in front of outsiders. So she's asking for practical tips to make him feel more confident. So thank you for taking up these two questions, Terran. Over to you.
And thanks to the moms for asking the really good questions. One thing I want to point out with both moms is their wish for their child that they could be different, that they could learn to do things that aren't coming to them right at the moment. And of course, this is a really natural wish. We all wish the best for our kids. What we have to be careful of is that we're not trying to take some picture that we have from inside about what a perfect child would do, or what children should be like, what they should do, and try to impose it on the child. We need to be really careful, again, to let the child, him or herself, unfold who they really are from inside. So this is important, to just accept the child for who he is. Yes, there are things we would love for our child, but first we need to accept them, really accept them for who they are and where they are, and let their gifts unfold rather than trying to make something happen that may or may not be unfolding from within the child themselves. And Purnima, here's the next thing that's going to come up is Purnima's story, because she told me a wonderful story about how she moved through this for herself with her own son. Do you want to share, Purnima, about how
Yeah.
you were wanting your son to be one way and he wasn't? So what happened?
Okay, so firstly, I'm a very reserved person, so this is going to be a bit challenging for me to talk in a personal way.
You're brave.
So anyway, so here goes. When I received this question from Shambhavi, I was looking at myself a little bit. Maybe 30 to 40% of her questions were kind of what I went through. Uh, I would have loved my son to play sports. He had a bicycle when he was 5 years old. Now he's outgrown it. We had a bicycle when he was again 10 years old. That he's outgrown it. We have another bicycle. We purchased another one when he was 12 or 13, and he's outgrown that also. So he learned how to ride the cycle, but he was never interested to do it as a sport or as an activity or as a game with his friends and so on. There is something within him which is going to be unfolded in its own time. So that's what I have learned in this last 14 years.
Mm.
We need to have confidence that what he is, what a child is, and what he wants to do, and how it develops, how it unfolds, is how it is going to be like. And
Mm.
we cannot hurry it up. We cannot like the caterpillar and butterfly story. Have a feeling that you've tried it, and be grateful that you have followed your heart. Be grateful that your child is following his heart. So, that's a big blessing that your child is having the courage to follow his heart and say, no,
Yes.
no, mama, I don't want to do this. So I'm
Yes.
grateful that that courage and conviction is there.
Yes.
And then I'm
Mm.
reminded of this poem by Robert Frost, where, he says, take the lane which is not often taken if you want to do that. So just let us all just uh, wait, be patient, be joyful, and allow our child to be joyful if during the process of this rebellion and rejection, it's actually joy which is unfolding.
Mm.
So,
Thank you, Purnima. Beautiful story. And I'm sure your son, I haven't met him, but I bet he's a lovely soul. So I do want to say the other side of it, that at the same time that we want to accept the kids for who they are, we also do want to help them with their points, their painful parts, where things are hard for them, things are painful for them. Like speaking up to someone is actually probably painful for this child, or thinking about going out to play with the boys. It's like, oh dear, I really don't want to, and we don't want them to have that fear and anxiety and discomfort. And there are things we can do um, to help with this kind of thing, with anxiety, with shyness, with physical coordination, and with stamina. What we don't want to do is to force them or even urge them. We don't want to say, why don't you speak up? Go on, speak up, because this is just going to make them feel more shy and go back inside. But we can go in the back door and do some things to try to get at what's causing them to be so shy and have this fear and this anxiety. And how can we work in more subtle, gentle ways to bring them out of themselves. So one thing we can do is to help them find other quiet friends so that they can be quiet together and have friends and speak up to each other kind of in their own time. There's another possibility. A lot of children who are very shy or very anxious have something that's called unintegrated baby reflexes or primitive reflexes that hold them back. Let me explain what that is a little bit. Um, I'll use an example that is relevant to anxiety and fear. A lot of people here have been moms, parents, probably most people. And you might remember when your baby was little, like say 4 months or littler, when there was a loud sound or the head dropped and lost balance, the baby had this reaction where they went and cry. Remember? They go, and then they fold up and they'd cry. And that's a certain reflex. It's a baby reflex. And it's there for a reason for the baby and their development. Um, However, it should at a certain point disappear. We don't all go around every time we hear a loud noise going and crying, because the reflex is integrated. It begins to disappear. It serves its purpose and it disappears. But with a lot of people, children and adults, it may not disappear completely. It may be there to some extent. I'm trying to get my glasses without so much reflection, but I can't. so, so there are ways to manage this, to deal with it, things you can do to help the child integrate those reflexes. I wish I could give you practical hints on this, but I can't, because it's a precise and subtle work, and it needs to be done with a skilled practitioner on a one-to-one basis, like the mom or dad works with the practitioner to work with a child. Um, so I just, on the next slide, I'll say a little bit more about this. Oops. One thing, actually, several people, this is all related. It's all going to fit together. several people asked me to talk about rhythmic movements. Rhythmic movements is something I do that is a reflex integration activity. And I teach parents how to do it with their children, and the parents do it every evening. And it's very, very effective for dealing with all sorts of difficulties. Um, Everything from like emotional things like shyness or fear to the other extreme of aggression or explosive behavior, sensory issues, even messy eating. Physical things like poor balance and coordination, clumsiness, decreased stamina, poor posture, and also certain academic things like challenges with reading, handwriting, paying attention, or sitting still. It seems to help sometimes dramatically with all of these things. Hema wrote in a very nice success story here. You want to read that, Purnima?
So Hema says her younger son Hemraj has been taking rhythmic movements at home and school under the guidance of Terran ma'am. We are surprised to find instant positive, noticeable changes in him. His attention span has increased, his command over his language has become better, his grasping power has improved, and many more positive changes in his behavior can be observed. We find this rhythmic movement very effective for our children.
So if there's someone who wants to know more about the rhythmic movements and other forms of reflex integration, um, you can contact me and we can talk about it. And it's best done hands-on um, with everybody there together. That's not possible right now because of the lockdown. It's possible we could work something out with a Zoom call over videos. I'm doing that with one mom with a little baby right now. It's not, you know, it's not ideal, but it's possible that it could, you know, we could get enough done that it would begin to help. The other thing that I very much recommend is going to these two websites, and we'll have these in the resource section too. My teacher, where I learned this, is Sonia Story, and her website is called moveplaythrive.com. And she offers online courses. They're fairly extensive. They're both for parents and for practitioners to learn to do this with other people. You take the same course. Um, Depending on where you live, in developing countries, the fee is rather high. If anyone is in the situation of wanting to take the course and the fee is too high, talk to me and we may be able to talk to Sonia. She's done some fee reductions for people living in India. We might, I mean, I can't make promises, but we might be able to work something out with her. And the other source is Rhythmic Movement Training International, and their website is there, rhythmicmovement.org. They also do trainings. I don't know that they have an online training. Those have all been in person, and I don't know how they're going to handle that during lockdown. But they also have a slightly different approach. It's the same basic work, slightly different approach. And I have friends who've trained with them and find it very, very valuable. So there are ways, I don't want to go into it too much on this particular webinar, but there are ways to move forward with it if you decide you want to do that. And I'm posting on the resources one sheet about reflex integration that you can look at to see if you think it might apply to your child. Okay, so we've actually had to skip a couple of sections because we're running over time. I'll post resources about the parts that we've missed. And what I did want to show is some of the success stories and ideas from our amazing families that have been working together in the Active Kids at Home group. People have come up with the most wonderful things. So here we go. This is Adana, and she says some things that have helped with her 2.5-year-old during lockdown are doing chores. Like here you see Rihan doing gardening. He also does sweeping, vacuuming, mopping, cleaning bathrooms, helping to cook and bake, and yoga. So here he is doing yoga with his mom. And here, Purnima, you're going to play the next one, which is a video. Let me see if it's going to work for me. No, mine's just black. You can play it, okay, Purnima? So this is Rehan helping to make idli.
Good job, Bunny. Yeah, that's great. That's just the right amount. Just one more, that's okay.
So I just think that's wonderful. This little 2.5-year-old working so diligently and really doing a very good job of putting these idlis away into the steamer. Now let's see, I'm trying to get back to my screen share. Go to the next one, please. Okay, here is Kirti says, as we know, stories play a vital role for kids. We have a story basket where she draws a picture for each story she got from grandparents and places it in the box. It's very enjoyable and helps to recap the story well. So there's Christina drawing her story picture. And here's Christina making pictures with leaves. And here she's making pictures with doll. Good sensory activities. Here are 2 books that were made by Shivani's son, Adit. Very charming books where one of them is called The Wizard's Magic and the other is called The King's Cupcake Face. I can only imagine what these stories are like. And here is Anna, who's now in UK, who's doing some homeschooling with her kids. So she's been doing treasure hunts where these clues to lead them from one place to another, and at the end there's a treasure. And each clue demands some kind of thinking and some kind of academic skill. Like this number 2 is look under the compound word. And then number 3 is asking for them to solve a math problem to find the next clue is that many centimeters from the front door. So she's teaching through these wonderful playful methods. This is a calculation machine. This is Adit again, and this time he's making recycled paper, tearing it into pieces, wetting it, they blend it, they put it out on the tea towel, and then pat it dry, roll it, and then it ends up being pieces of paper. A beautiful activity, and it's made him very conscious of paper and saving resources. This is if you want to join Active Kids at Home group, and this will also be in the resources. You can click on this link and join us to share ideas that you might have and hear other people's ideas. And last, I want to end with some thoughts I had about parenting, about having faith in yourself and in your child. Have faith in yourself, in your intuition, in your creativity, in your ability to guide your child wisely, in the power of your love. Have faith in your child, in his potential, in her strength, courage, and tender heart, in his connection with an inner guiding source, in her beautiful self that will find a way to unfold. So important, having faith. And then finally, I want to show this quote from one of our Heartfulness guides about parenting. You should not only have confidence in your upbringing of the children, but also have faith in their ability to stay on the path that you lead them on. So I hope all the parents that are listening just proceed with that faith in yourself and your own creativity and your own inner guidance and your child's inner guidance. And I'm sure you're going to find some really happy ways forward. So that's it. I'm complete.
Thank you so much, Terran. Thanks to all the participants who joined us today. And thanks to all those mothers and fathers who came up with your questions and with your success stories and with all that wisdom and ideas and tips with what worked and what didn't work. And thanks for all the love. I know some of the questions have not been answered because of a shortage of time. However, please don't let that stop you from continuing your interaction with Terran. Please continue to write to us, and Terran is sure to answer all your questions over email and, if necessary, on calls. And we'll see how we'll work out a way to get everything answered. Thanks so much for this webinar. And stay tuned, and we'll be putting up the next webinar on the website shortly, and I hope to see you all there. Have a wonderful day.